We apologize for interrupting your doom scrolling. Now, for some positive leftist news.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Sanderson here. I go by the Canadian Commie. You can find me at thecanadiancommie.com. I'm here reporting for positive leftist news to remind you that it's not the world that's dying, it's the system of capital that's dying. Here's some stories to show you how you could organize against the death of capitalism to rebuild a new society from its ashes.
An international group of tech activists, known as the Zionism Observer, has successfully taken down an Israeli Defense Forces extortion website 3 times, using public pressure rather than hacking. The site, linked to psychological warfare against Palestinians in Gaza, was first removed after the collective traced its hosting to Webflow and launched a public campaign. Within 24 hours, Webflow took down the site, referencing likely illegal activity. The collective also reversed-engineered a second IDF website related to forced evacuations, revealing sloppy coding and data leaks. Their efforts led to the website being taken down multiple times, with GoDaddy eventually suspending the site following public complaints. The Zionism Observer continues to develop tools to counteract the IDF's digital operations, including an interactive mapping project aimed at exposing the effects of the Israeli military's actions in Gaza. Their success suggests that solidarity with Palestine is gaining a technological edge against Israel's well-known so-called startup nation, while Israel's once-lauded tech sector is succumbing to international boycotts and is becoming a shell of its former self. Colombia, the largest exporter of coal to Israel, has suspended all coal export to the apartheid state until it has ceased its genocide in Gaza. Colombian President Gustavo Petro signed a decree banning all coal export to the apartheid state and called upon all ship crews to do the same, saying, "May all the sailors of the world, may our indigenous peoples refuse to bring coal from any country to Netanyahu." Colombia had previously suspended diplomatic relations with Israel over the ongoing genocide. And for those who say this decree will harm Colombian mine workers, only a few weeks into the genocide, Sintra Carbon, the largest Colombian mine workers union, responded to a call for solidarity from Palestinian trade movements, and issued a statement calling for the halting of Colombian coal exports to Israel. Sintra Carbon also highlighted Israel's role in training right-wing death squads and mercenaries responsible for widespread atrocities in Colombia. This is a huge blow to the Zionist state, as 20% of its energy comes from coal-fired power. While Israel does have natural gas-powered stations, many have had to be shut down, out of fear they will become targets for resistance forces. The next largest coal suppliers are South Africa and Russia, which does not bode well for the economically struggling nation, as those countries may soon follow Colombia's suit. What this spells is nothing less than an energy crisis for Israel, which threatens to cripple what remains of their economy and slow the gears of their genocidal war machine. Historically, this tactic was also used against apartheid South Africa to great effect. The Zionist state cannot weather such economic blows indefinitely.
Hey everyone, this is Jacob, Mexi's husband and member of Independent Jewish Voices here, just stepping in to deliver some local good news. After retweeting a video meant to criticize Israel's involvement in the 2024 Paris Olympics, Fred Hahn, president of the Ontario Canadian Union of Public Sector Employees, or CUPE, was asked to step down by the national executive in a sudden and shocking betrayal by the administration. Doug Ford, the Conservative Premier of Ontario, also put public pressure on the Labour leader to resign. Hahn, a beloved figure who can be found repping his union at nearly every protest in Toronto worth going to, and who recently won re-election with a majority of rank-and-file CUPE Ontario members, quickly received an outpouring of support, both from within and outside the union, from Palestinian and Jewish anti-Zionist organizations. Understanding that this was a red alert moment for Palestinian solidarity in Canada, pro-Palestine organizations sprang into action, writing statements, offering speakers, creating petitions, and organizing email drives. Their efforts paid off, as Hahn received sufficient support and wind in his sails to stand up to the national executive, stand strong in his convictions, and refuse to step down. If he had, it would have been a monumental blow to the ability of the Canadian labor unions to support the cause of Palestinian liberation. Labor unions played a pivotal role in the undoing of apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia. For the full IJV statement in support of Fred, please see the show notes. Way to go, CUPE Ontario, and thank you, Fred, for not letting the bullies win. Back to you, John.
The grassroots advocacy group Lahaina Strong's push to convert over 7,000 short-term rentals in Maui into long-term housing has advanced, with the Planning Commission unanimously recommending the County Council approve the proposal. Responding to the push, Mayor Richard Bisson advanced legislation aimed at addressing the island's housing crisis, which included passionate testimony from residents. This might be a record amount of testimony, Planning Commission Chair Kim Thayer said when the last testifier spoke. It was remarkable. So many people came up to testify for the first time ever. The commission supported a phased elimination of short-term rentals, with 2,200 units in West Maui set to be converted by July 2025, and the remainder by January 2026. This rapid phase-out in West Maui is partially driven by the displacement of 13,000 residents due to the recent Lahaina wildfire, with significant portions of what used to be residential real estate now dedicated towards servicing tourists, up to 87% in some areas around Lahaina. Less and less options have been left available for the residents of Maui. The County Council is expected to consider the proposal by the end of the year, and while the outcome remains to be seen, commentators emphasized this as a vital stride in the right direction. Lahaina Strong considers this a significant win in their fight to convert transient vacation rentals into housing for residents. PLN will be following this story as it progresses. Thousands of Disneyland workers have secured an incredible 31% pay increase following a 4-month campaign and strike threat. The new contract, accepted by the workers, will raise the minimum hourly wage from $19.90 to $26 over the next 3 years, with an immediate bump to $24. The agreement was reached after an intense campaign by a coalition of 4 Disney unions, representing 14,000 employees. During negotiations, workers authorized a strike, which would have been the first at the park in 40 years. Disney was so spooked at the prospect of a strike that a deal was reached before any walkouts were necessary. The contract also introduces more flexible attendance and sick leave policies, and includes longevity pay increases for cast members, or those who perform as Disney characters. Additionally, the wage hikes are retroactive from June 17th. The unions celebrated the agreement. Union representatives described the deal as historic and the contract we all deserve. Congratulations to the organizers. At the American Federation of Teachers annual convention in Houston, the union's 1.8 million members took a significant step by endorsing a nationwide general strike for 2028. United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain praised the AFT for its support, calling it a crucial move towards building a mass movement for workers' rights. Fain, who has massive support both within and outside the union, emphasized the importance of unity across the labor movement, stating, "We want to create a mass movement, a general strike if we have to win our fair share, not just for workers here, but for working-class people all over the globe." His deeply class-conscious remarks followed the ATF's resolution to align all local union contracts to expire on May 1st, 2028, coinciding with the date set by the UAW for potential nationwide work stoppage. The strategic timing on May Day, a day historically linked to labor rights, aims to mobilize workers across the United States in a collective effort against capitalist exploitation. The move has been hailed as a major boost to Fain's vision of a general strike, with the Chicago Teachers Union already advocating for the 2028 expiration date in its negotiations. AFT leaders see this as a step towards achieving broader gains for working people, from local bargaining tables to the national stage and even beyond. Minneapolis recently celebrated the 90th anniversary of the 1934 trucker strike, a pivotal event in the city's labor history. On July 27th, union members, labor leaders, and descendants of the original strikers gathered in Waban Park to honor the strike that brought the city to a standstill and ignited a nationwide labor movement. The 1934 strike, led by Teamsters Local 574, saw truckers demand fair wages and union recognition. The strike, which lasted 3 months, faced fierce opposition from the Citizens Alliance, violent thugs hired by the local bourgeois to break the strike. The conflict escalated on July 20th, 1934, when Minneapolis police opened fire on picketers, injuring 67 and killing 2, in what became known as Bloody Friday. The strike ultimately contributed to the creation of the National Labor Relations Act in 1935. The anniversary event, organized by Remember 1934 and supported by the Teamsters and local unions, featured labor folk music, historical storytelling, and remembrances. Descendants of the strikers, including the grandchildren of fallen striker Henry Ness, shared memories and reflected on how the strike shaped their families and political views. In addition to honoring the past, attendees also expressed solidarity with current labor struggles, including Minneapolis park workers who had recently secured a new contract after a 3-week strike. The event highlighted the lasting impact of the 1934 strike on workers' rights today, with attendees noting its role in securing benefits such as the 8-hour workday and collective bargaining rights. Remember, folks, the union makes us strong. In a landmark development for labor relations in the tech industry, workers at the Towson, Maryland Apple retail store, the first in the United States to unionize, have reached an agreement with Apple. The tentative 3-year contract, brokered by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, coalition of organized retail employees, includes several key improvements. Enhanced scheduling flexibility and protections for both full-time and part-time employees. Average wage hikes of 10% over the contract period and higher starting pay for 80% of job classifications. Restrictions on the use of contracted employees and a severance package for those who are affected. A fair disciplinary process with clear guidelines and protections. The agreement also ensures that all existing benefits are maintained and includes provisions for negotiating any future benefits. The negotiating committee explained, "Through tireless dedication, the IAM Core negotiating team secured a contract that not only meets but exceeds the needs and expectations of our members, but sets a standard for Apple workers. IAM is one of North America's largest and most diverse industrial unions, with around 600,000 members across various industries, including aerospace, healthcare, and automotive. This agreement is a notable victory for unionized tech workers and could set a precedent in labor negotiations with major tech companies." A federal judge has ruled that Google has unlawfully maintained a monopoly over Internet search services. The decision, issued by U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta, accuses Google of using its dominance to suppress competition and innovation, and represents a landmark case in ongoing antitrust actions against major tech firms. The ruling found that Google controls 89.2% of the general search market, a figure that rises to 94.9% on mobile devices. The ruling describes Google as a monopolist that has leveraged its market power to protect its search engine by spending billions on exclusive agreements and default settings for its search engine on new devices. The ruling represents a major setback for Google and its parent company, Alphabet, which had defended its market position by arguing that its search engine's popularity was due to consumer preference, rather than blatant market manipulation. The ruling also sets the stage for a subsequent trial to determine possible remedies, which could include structural changes to Alphabet. The decision is the first major triumph in a series of antitrust cases targeting tech giants including Meta, Amazon, and Apple. Anti-fascist groups outnumbered and drove out fascist hate rallies in the UK, in cities such as Newcastle, Liverpool, Brighton, and Birmingham, highlighting a growing resistance against hate-driven violence. The recent surge in fascist activity follows the tragic stabbing of 3 children in Southport, which extremist groups used to fuel their agenda. Far-right pogromists targeted mosques, viciously assaulted random non-white people, and attempted to lay siege to refugee housing centers. In response, community solidarity groups and trade unions have rallied to oppose the far-right's growing influence. The National Education Union, the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, and the Fire Brigades Union have voiced strong support for the targeted communities, urging the new Labour government to combat the xenophobia and austerity measures that have exacerbated social divisions. Activists from organizations like Stand Up to Racism have organized mass events and issued many unity statements condemning the far right. The statement, backed by politicians, media, and cultural figures, emphasized that far-right groups pose a threat to all communities. Despite these counter-demonstrations, the threat of further violence persists. Figures like Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson continue to spread misinformation and incite hatred. As fascist groups plan additional pogroms in cities like Manchester and Leeds, local communities remain committed to promoting solidarity and equality through ongoing protests and militant community defense. Remember, comrades, fascists are nothing but paper tigers who cower at the sight of organized communities. Social and workers' movements worldwide have united in a campaign to support Venezuela, following a series of attacks on the country after its recent presidential elections. The campaign, titled For Democracy and Sovereignty, Hands Off Venezuela, was launched on August 9th by ALBA Movimientos, the International People's Assembly, the Simon Bolivar Institute, and the Assembly of Caribbean Peoples. The campaign responds to a coordinated effort by right-wing political actors, mainstream media, and the U.S. and its allies to secure regime change in Venezuela, as they've been trying to do for decades. This is despite the country holding one of the most internationally observed elections in history. The campaign condemns the media narratives questioning the election's validity and the impact of economic sanctions on the country. Venezuela's strategic importance, its vast natural resources and geopolitical role, has long made it a target for imperialist interests. In the United States, activists gathered in front of the New York Times building, accusing the newspaper of supporting regime change operations. The demonstration was part of a broader international day of action organized to reject imperialist intervention. In South Africa, the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa voiced support for Venezuela and criticized media outlets for reproducing U.S. propaganda. The global solidarity movement aims to challenge imperialist coups and to support the right to self-determination amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. A historic custody ruling in China recognized 2 legal mothers for the first time, a notable milestone for LGBTQ+ rights in the country. A Beijing court has recognized the right of a woman to have a visitation rights with her daughter, marking a significant legal acknowledgement of same-sex parenthood in China. This decision comes after a prolonged legal battle that began when Didi, a 42-year-old woman and her wife, who married in the United States, separated, and the children were taken to Beijing by her estranged spouse. Despite this victory, the court did not grant Didi custody or visitation rights to her son, underscoring the challenges within LGBTQ+ family law in China. The ruling is celebrated as a historic breakthrough by LGBTQ+ activists, although same-sex unions remain unrecognized by Chinese law. The case has sparked widespread discussion and is seen as a step forward in a society increasingly supportive of LGBTQ+ issues. Surveys show growing public acceptance of same-sex parents, yet legal reforms lag behind. This case sets a precedent and illustrates the gradual shift towards acknowledging diverse family forms in China. Frankfurt Airport, Germany's largest airport and major international hub, was shut down August 1st after climate activists from the group Last Generation blocked runways by gluing themselves to the tarmac. The protest led to the cancellation of around 140 flights out of the 1,400 scheduled for the day. The activists cut through the airport's perimeter fence and accessed the runways on foot, bicycles, and skateboards, holding banners reading, "Oil kills." The group is demanding that the German government commit to a global treaty to phase out oil, gas, and coal by 2030. The protest is part of a broader campaign by Last Generation, which has staged similar disruptions at other German airports. This action follows similar protests at airports across Europe, including London's Heathrow and Vienna's airport, as part of the A22 network of climate protesters, highlighting the growing number of passionate activists using increasingly disruptive direct action tactics to push governments towards more aggressive climate policies. Mass protests have erupted across Serbia in response to Rio Tinto's planned lithium mining project. Thousands of Serbians have taken to the streets, with a major demonstration on August 10th in Belgrade. The protesters are calling on the government to pass legislation to prevent the exploitation of lithium and boron, and have warned of escalating actions if their demands are not met. The proposed Jadar project, located near Loznica and the Jadar River, has sparked significant environmental concerns. The project would require large amounts of water, and could lead to severe contamination of the region's water reserves. This fear is intensified by Rio Tinto's controversial track record in other countries, such as Papua New Guinea. Environmental activists argue that the potential environmental impact of the Jadar project is unprecedented, and question Rio Tinto's ability to manage it safely, given its history of labor and human rights violations. The European Union's interest in the Jadar project is driven by its need for lithium to support its Green Deal and transition to electric vehicles. Despite these assurances that the project would adhere to high environmental standards, many Serbians remain skeptical, viewing the project as a threat to their natural resources and an example of deepening dependence on EU countries. Protesters argue that the project undermines Serbia's sovereignty and risks significant environmental harm for minimal financial benefit. While a transition to renewable energy is needed, we can't leave sacrifice zones in its wake. Solidarity with communities fighting for environmental justice. Comrades, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to mexi@protonmail.com. Thank you to Javi for the positive news jams. Thank you to Cosmo for the positive news background. Thank you to Mexi and Catherine for script writing and production. And thank you to Marshall for editing this video. And to yours truly, of course, for hosting this one. If you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews, or you can give us a one-time tip. The link is in the description box below.